Hello, welcome back to the Michael Sisco show. Let's give it a second. I'm sure we're going to have some viewers because of we have the very infamous Curt Doolittle joining the show. Well, welcome to the Michael Sisco show, Curt.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for inviting me.
So I'm expecting
Yeah,
a good
I don't
crowd.
really mind having the bad boy of philosophy reputation. I don't. It's fine with me.
Well, it's kind of nice because I don't even really have to introduce you. It's just people know. Hey, tight. I'm changing this goes on Facebook as well. So but I have to make it change the privacy settings so that the comments will appear on my end. So it looks like a few people are in the chats. We have a let's go from so some people are excited. But how have you been? How's everything been since this? Last time I saw you was actually in Richmond on 4th of July, which was the first time that we've met in real life. But how's everything been since then?
That's fine. Although my doctor said never do that again, you'll die. So I think it was probably
That's funny.
So don't do it again.
Well, was it the heat or?
Yeah, because if you've had, I had cancer, and so I take an awful lot of drugs, and plus for my allergies, because my immune system is compromised. So apparently, taking what I take and being in the heat is a good way to kill yourself. Which I felt like I was dying. I don't remember if you know.
Hello, hang tight 1 second. I gotta mute this entropy, but just for everybody watching. The chats might get a little crazy with Curt Doolittle as we get more of a crowd rolling in here. So if you want to guarantee that I read him a question, put it through as a super chat on entropy. It's hard for me to keep up with the D Live, especially. Yeah, even though we already have questions on D Live, but we're gonna hop in. Welcome back to the show, Curt. Previously you came on, I was kind of asking about your ideas in relation to neo-reaction and whatnot. And that was last year at some point, before.
I remember you. I can't, I do so many, I don't remember the individual ones. I just remember if the person I'm talking to was worth talking to.
Yeah.
I remember you.
Well, I remember you were impressed that I sent prep questions, so I made sure to do it again.
I don't understand why people ask you to come on without knowing. Like if you're an author, you're making a cycle, then you're there to talk about your book. But for me, I mean, my work is, we made the populist play here, but my work is actually technical. So. It's kind of, it's like one of those things of I'd love to make you understand, but I have to have a classroom to do it anyway. Yeah, so I'm glad to be here.
Well, hey, you've always been kind to me. You were nice in Richmond too, so I won't be.
I'm a nice guy. I mean, the problem with teaching online is that it's basically like trying to hold court in a locker room with a bunch of 16-year-old kids. And so, you have to be a bit of a hard ass in order to maintain any semblance of order. And so I just am excessively intolerant, and that helps to maintain it. So that's just my approach to keeping some semblance of order.
Yeah. Well, last time I had you on the show, you did describe proprietarianism as a scientific approach. And I was kind of thinking about that. The Soviet Union and even the Communist Party USA, they describe their system as scientific. So what is the core distinction, and how can we trust that your system wouldn't be as equally destructive as other systems that claim to be scientific as well?
Well, I mean, all I'm doing is writing down what we've done for 5,000 years in the analytic form. I mean, that's what I set out to do, and that's what I've done. So if it was unscientific and it wasn't going to work, it wouldn't have got us here. Everybody knows what's wrong with the socialist and communist system. It's really a couple of things. The first of which is, it's the priority that you put them in matters. It's either economic calculation is impossible, or incentives are impossible, or both. But really, what it is that instead of generating a market for positive reciprocity, central planning generates a market for corruption. And so, really, those are the three differences. I tended to come in through the libertarian side. So when I was marketing my work originally, I did it from that perspective because I thought I would reach people more. But fundamentally, what I'm doing is strictly constructed law. And if you studied jurisprudence at a fairly good law school, they would teach you that there is a spectrum of interpretations of what law means, and one of those is natural law, and I would say that what I've done is simply put that into a formal language. In other words, formal logic and operational logic, instead of this sort of loosey-goosey philosophy that they teach in law school. And the primary utility of doing that is that it's possible to tell whether someone is, it's possible to determine whether what a person is testifying to or claiming is true is actually testifiable. And so, in other words, it's an extremely good way of filtering out what is true and false, or what one can't claim is true. And once you've decided that something's not testifiable, all you have left to judge is incentives. And if we find out that someone's seeking a reciprocity, well, I mean, we're doing what we do in court every day. I've just turned it into basically software instead of loose philosophy.
Okay.
So when I started going public with this, it was I was taking the philosophical approach because I thought it would be a little more accessible to people. But, given that I failed at that, I'm just going to go back to the technical and stay there.
Well, that kind of leads to this. We have what happened in Richmond. Did you want
Nothing happened in Richmond. We had a blast. You were there, right? We had a great time. I gave my speech. We had a little bit of ruckus with a couple of guys from BLM. Unfortunately, it almost spread up into the Second Amendment guys, we don't want to agitate. They're sort of supposed to be on our side, but that was it. And I didn't realize that there were a bunch of little Marxists out there shooting videos. And they were trying to capture and news clip everything into which is what they do, right? They're masters of negative optics. And so that's what they did. Now, it didn't matter to us who were there. We thought we had a great time. We were successful. But the online community, specifically the nitwit fringe, really ran with it. So, I mean, John said, well, if this is what it's going to be like trying to have a rational conversation on social media, that means social media is a dead market. We can't actually use social media anymore to try to push ideas and solutions out. And so that's where we got to. In other words, what's happened is the alt-right or the meme right, or I don't know what you want to call them, I think of it as the dissident right, has basically adopted the left's tactics. That's what memeing is, right? I mean, it's ridicule, and they've just run with it to the point they're no longer conservatives anymore. They're no longer Europeans. They're just the enemy with a different bent. So I just look at it as and said, well, okay, if we can't use social media, we can't. In other words, we can't go out with a straight message on social media, and they shut us down if we don't go with a compromise message. Then there's really no way to reach the people and organize them. And so we just figured our 1.5-year experiment with seeing if we could create a political movement out of the dissident right was a disaster. Not because of us or anything, but because if that's the kind of reaction you get from your own, it's just not worth. It's a lost cause.
Yeah, I think, because I didn't really, when I was there, nothing seemed like that big of a deal. In fact, it seemed kind of the fact that we diffused that situation
was great.
Was quite a relief. And then I wasn't aware of the videos until really later. I guess from the people that were at home, the issue that they took, took most issue with, I guess, was they felt like we were, or you were capitulating to, by giving a mic to BLM, I think.
Well, it wasn't my mic.
Yeah.
The Second Amendment guys brought them over and asked me to talk to them. It's their mic. That's how we organized who was talking that day. So, I mean, whoever had the mic got to talk. I'm like, okay, well, we diffuse the situation, it's fine. But it's like, it's this very ceremonial thinking small that is really killing any chance of victory here. And, it's not just us, right? Nobody can get a foothold because our own people are their worst enemy. So, they've just turned into there's no difference between the right and Antifa other than what they want. They behave the same. So, I mean, I don't know, what are we supposed to do? I mean, I'm coming out with a Jeffersonian, a founding fathers level of proposal. It fixes all the issues. It tries to avoid a civil war. And if we propose those issues and we get to a civil war, we'd have the numbers to win. But I can't do that with people who are that stupid. I just can't. There's nothing that can be done. So, I don't know what we do now, because Trump's going to lose the election for sure now. So if he's going to lose that election and they're going to come in, now it's just going to be open season, and the people are going to have the state. So either we act soon or we don't. I don't know. I just don't feel like. I feel like the window. We were on the window. We moved into the right spot in the window, and the only thing that happened is our own idiots blew it.
Okay. We do have a comment about one of your compliments that you gave. Apparently, that was an issue as well. But
it's not true, right? It's not true that they're stronger. It's not true that they have bigger dicks, right? What was I really doing?
Yeah.
What did I say? The whole thing's taped. And what I said was, look, you have a legitimate problem, and I think they have a legitimate beef. They're screwed. Why are they screwed? Because they have a demographic that can't survive in an advanced market economy without the extraordinary redistributions possible after the Second World War. Now that time period's ended. They're screwed. And so it's not like we can just look at them and say, be screwed. I understand why they're complaining. I don't even, my problem is, so what? They're not smart enough to come up with an answer. So, our job is to provide an answer, and that's what I did. So, if you want me to go beat on somebody that I think of for dramatic effect to please the puerile, the pubescent audience, that would be kind of stupid. What I really did was make a bunch of jokes, tell them the truth. Look, everybody we had like you that's difficult, we killed over the past 1,000 years. And, that's really what it is. And I had to smooth that with something nice. So I smoothed it with 2 false compliments that they thought would be masculine and humorous. So, I don't even know how you can how can you even misinterpret that? It just seems kind of stupid to me. But then, I'm a grown up and I've been through a lot of life and done a lot of things. I've been in a lot of hostile negotiations and on every subject you can imagine, from business to politics to economics to war. And so if 16-year-old kids can take that knowledge and experience and those kind of arguments, and 15, 16, 17-year-old morons can shit on the public discourse and ruin the ability to organize our people into action, well, we're kind of ruined. We're kind of screwed. Really, that's the answer.
Yeah. My chats are polarized. Some people are, take it easy on Curt. Other people are telling me to just crush you, but we're gonna be nice.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, you can't crush me. I'd have to be able to be insulted.
That's true.
True. It's like, so what?
Yeah. But so you were collecting signatures, just to get back on topic. You were collecting signatures to petition for constitutional reform. What? Well, I wasn't quite really. I didn't have time to read the whole thing while I was there, so I did not. I was hesitant to sign. What constitutional reforms were you, in fact, or are you trying to advocate for, especially on that petition?
Well, I mean, the petitions goes to the constitutional reforms. The constitutional reforms are a huge laundry list. The most important of which is restructuring the Constitution. I put out a podcast with giving the example of how you would restate the Second Amendment. And I did that because, first of all, it would be interesting to people on the right. But secondly, it shows how it's impossible to weasel out of if you structure law strictly. And so what I really did was I just said, here's how the Constitution needs to be structured. Here's what the founders left out. Here's why. Let's put this back in. And so that was basically restoring the law. The second thing is, the second body of stuff is basically economic reforms, and 9/10 of what I put in there is economic reforms. Those economic reforms are meant to, or some strategic, but mostly to get us out of the position where we're being governed by and abused by a world financial elite that what they're trying to do to us is make us go away. So that economic system is quite powerful, and I'm sure that, I'm not, that somebody will also propose something like it, but I've done the whole package. Most of those things are, can you imagine not having to, imagine there's no interest on a home loan, right? You would pay it off in 15 years, and you'd be, and if we reformed education, you wouldn't be paying that much money for education. So now you can afford to have kids again. So just simple things like that. But I mean, the ability for politicians to lie would be gone. The ability for people to claim our Constitution as a living document rather than a formal logic that is open to transactional changes by contract, and that our economy is no longer necessary to keep the bias toward the private sector as it was during the westward expansion. These things are not there. See, the problem is there, your average conservative isn't knowledgeable enough about any of those subjects to do anything to talk about it in moral terms. The problem is the conservatives aren't wrong about the moral objections they have. They just don't know how to talk about it in adult terms. And so what I've tried to do is make it possible to talk about these things in adult terms.
Okay. Do you really think democracy can work in a multicultural empire like the USA is now?
It doesn't. I mean, can it work? Well, it doesn't work. Democracy is a very simple process, right? I mean, I don't know who said it, but you're a communist at home, a socialist in your extended family. You're a democracy in your village, a republic in your territory, and a dictatorship in your military. And that's how it has to be, because that's the only kind of decisions that can be made at those levels. So what is democracy for? It's a technique or technology for the selection of priorities among people with common interests. It can't solve the problem of people with disparate interests. Markets solve the problem of disparate interests. So, markets solve disparate interests in consumer goods and services. But what about commons? The commons we need for a high-trust Northern European, highly eugenic society is different from the eugenics you need from a Mexican or an African society, because the genetic distribution of those people, their degree of neoteny, and their experience, their demographics, and their experience with advanced society just aren't there. So they need different commons. So if we're going to have a market for the production of commons, you have to separate. So you can't have you can have an intermixing economy, but you can't have intermixing polities, because what we differ on, in other words, what we need differently and want differently are commons. In other words, things that governments produce, not markets produce.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems like you at the same time, you say like the common conservative, while they have the right moral objections, they may not have enough knowledge to really see these things. But your strategy seems to be somewhat of a populist based system. Like if you're trying to enact constitutional reforms, there will need to be, within the framework of our republic, some sort of critical mass of popular support. How do you go about that?
Well, I don't think there's going to be a democratic solution to any of our given problems. I don't think any. I think that I said this in 2012 through 14, and people said, "Oh, you're crazy, right?" But how many people are agreeing with me now that we're very close to civil war, right? I mean, and so you say it's a populist opinion. My attitude isn't that it's a populist decision. We're either going to do it by force or we're going to lose.
Okay. I guess at what point do you know it's like the right time?
It was the right time in July to launch in October. But since that, I think we've lost the window. So now the optimum time for a civil war is right after Trump loses the election and it's very cold. And so that's when we probably want to have one. And I suspect if someone has half a brain, it's there. It's not going to be me that it's not going to be me that gets the 50,000 together. I probably could have, but after this summer, I don't think I can do it.
Okay. Now I have heard you did advocate for something similar, what sounded to me like a similar as to like the Confederation of States type thing, allowing different. It almost, I could be wrong, but my impression was that even at the local level, forms of government could be differently based on the needs of the locale. Could you kind of expound on that a little bit?
Right. The law is the same, but in other words, the basic law is the same. You just can't lie about it. So if you want to create some particular system, you can just put it in your constitution in truthful language, so that it's said. The problem is that we strategically have to hold the continent. Unless we want to become like Germany, which is the victim of the people on both sides of them, we have to hold the continent. And the other value of the United States is, while these people are obsessed with the coasts, this is just an immigrant issue. The value of the United States is the Mississippi River Valley from the Great Lakes down and to the all west to the Rockies, because you can feed the whole planet with it. And we're about to get into a situation where the whole planet's going to have a problem feeding itself. It's not just me that thinks this, right? This is pretty, I mean, listen to Zihan. I mean, he's a popular guy. So we need to keep the coast, which just means we need to keep the continent, because if we don't, we'll get intrusions from both directions. So my view was, let's try to do what the founders set up originally, which is imitate the Holy Roman Empire. Oh, somebody argued with me about that today. I thought it was stupid. But I mean, look what's the Holy Roman Empire? It's the complete history of the European Middle Ages, right? From 700 to 1860, right? That's the entire history of Europe. Is Greater Germany is 300 petty princedoms. Well, and so why did that work for 1,000 years? Well, because really it works really, really good. The nation state was the novel invention. And what did they make it for? So they could increase debt and produce Napoleonic wars with total warfare. So, my view is let's keep the federal government as the founders intended, just as we've practiced in Western civilization for over 1,000 years. Let's just keep the basic strategy that's been successful for us, which is a lot of states with a weak federal government. during most of our history, the weak federal government was the church. I'd prefer we have a scientific federal government in the court, but that's all we really need, because when you're in that situation, internal peer pressure is what keeps the peace and keeps the system working. So my view is just to do that. So we would just go back and say, well, let's, instead of states, we would just say, if you get 300,000 people together, you can form a state. You need about that many. I mean, it's the size of Iceland, right? Iceland is about 300,000 people. You can make a state with 300,000 people. I mean, there's plenty. We got a couple of states now that are hard to do that with. So put 300,000 people together, create a state, create a capital, and we have shared defense, shared treasury, shared insurer of last resort status. But then we devolve all the powers of the government, like the founders intended, back to the states. And the only thing the federal government is responsible for is borders, trade policy, and, in other words, making sure nobody's abusing anything, and disputes between the states. The only reason the federal government centralizes, second, is because of the Civil War. Everybody knows that. It was the war of northern aggression in order to keep the South from controlling the West. So let's just finish the original job, which was the North's a pain in the ass, so let's get rid of them, and let's isolate the blue cities. It's half the population now is in blue cities. We create a high quality of life that's intolerant outside of those blue cities, and what'll happen is the blue cities will die and the good people will come join us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Civil War really was our actual revolution, not a rebellion from England, but it was a revolution, and it seems like.
What do you mean it's a revolution?
Because that is where the federal government got basically the nature of their powers changed.
It's where we transformed. Okay.
Yeah, and that was more revolutionary than just our seceding from England, so to speak. How do you like? And in the book called On Power, Bertrand de Juvenal kind of discusses like the growth of the mega state, and to me that seemed like just part of that development. How do you, what mechanisms can you apply to keep that from happening again?
What mechanisms can you apply? How many people had to die in order to create that central government? You think it wouldn't happen if we have sovereignty of individual states? People are going to let it happen again? I guess I don't understand. If you mean, could a military coup occur? Well, again, that's a question. That's something that is fairly easy to solve. But I need to understand your question more clearly. There was a huge benefit during the Industrial Revolution to scale, because you could. You had to be able, in order to be able to get enough resources to create an industrial revolution and the military body to protect that state, was you had to be able to create, colonial territories. You had to be able to police your own trade routes. You had to be able to move back and forth. Well, we don't do that anymore because America America polices the world trade routes. So you had to do all that. But what's happened now is, if you're Switzerland, you have, got 10 million people, and you've got guys with assault rifles, some artillery and nuclear weapons. What's anybody going to do to you? I mean, it's really, we've gotten to the point where the militia is, in other words, that's why I want the militia restored, is the militia is more dangerous than combined arms. I mean, we've lost to militias for the past 20 years. So why are we fighting why are we fighting history? Let's just acknowledge what's happened. I mean, if you have a militarized workforce, every able-bodied man, it keeps your men fit and healthy. You do a couple of weeks of training a year, you stay fit for that, and you're basically unconquerable. That said, just think of the economic opportunity that would be created by all these new states now have the freedom to govern their own futures. How we can't create a high quality polity because it'll be treated as a tragedy of the commons, right? All the lowlifes will come and destroy it because we can't protect our commons. But what if we could? What if we could restore voluntary separation, segregation? What if we could police our commons and say, you don't have any rights other than, these right here. And if that's all you have, and so we're going to have a nice, happy, traditional society. And other places can go and be Amsterdam or New York. But we get to you, so you go to the market that serves you, and we continue the big sword.
Okay, that's actually kind of similar to some neo-cameralism ideas that even people
Except
like
neo-cameralism's kind of ridiculous, but okay.
I agree, but there's that concept of you're kind of a customer and you can.
Right, it's really simple. He's Jewish. He's from a Jewish family. He's going to come up with an answer. I'm Anglo. I'm going to come up with this answer. We carry our biases with us as we can't escape them. They're partly in our genes, but they're also in the traditions we inherited from our families. So you sort of can't escape them. It's like the problem I have with monarchy. I mean, monarchy as Elizabeth, in the sense of Elizabeth, as a judge of last resort. That's about the most wonderful thing you can have in a government, and try to make the average American understand that. Well, no, they just go by what their instincts are. They don't really think it through. But there's something better to have than a monarch. The evidence is overwhelming now, and Hoppe was right all along.
True. We do have a super chat from Western Revival. We should be spending our efforts on private events where they cannot be sabotaged, as well as grassroots activisms with our guys on bullhorns in the streets, red pilling a critical mass of normie cons. We can't win without grassroots activism. So thank you for the $5. Any comments on that?
Well, I know who that is. I'm not going to disagree with him because he's right. I have to decide whether that's a good use of my time. And right now, if I feel like I have to deal with the room temperature IQ crowd very much anymore, it's a poor use of my time. So I've got so much to do right now. I mean, I basically work I get up, sit behind my computer, and I work. I run to the store and I make sure the old lady stays alive. And I'm just overwhelmed with stuff to do, and the timetable keeps moving. I thought, well, Trump's going to get, because of his economy, he's going to get a little bit more, but I got to seize the window just in case to start organizing. But now it's like, well, I just think it's going to be house to house, and I think we're going to lose because I think everything I've seen, Augustus said this to me he says, I think all these guys are paper macho tigers. So I think there's some men out there, but it's not looking very good. So we'll see. I mean, so what we found is there's about, if you get 100,000 guys, there's maybe 1,000 in there worth having. And so this is how we're in a pretty bad state. I thought the numbers look great on paper until you actually meet the people. It's not like they're farmers anymore. Right? It's not like they're farmers anymore.
Yeah. Let's see. Brian Whitaker.
No, I didn't answer his question. Yes, you are right. We should have them. I disagree that we shouldn't have public events that cause tension. See, what I loved about our event in Richmond is we had a blast. We got some attention, and it spun positively. The only people that spun it negatively were our own. Like I said, the alt-right is its own worst enemy. They're just a disaster. So if we went out and we have conflict and we handle it like that over and over again, it's going to be fantastic. That's exactly what we want because it gets us press. I don't want to show up and do what everybody wants me to do, which is, zig heil and point guns. I mean, make the teenagers feel good, but it's also the path to losing. I want to go out there and provoke them with with a rational choice. Do we want to have grassroots organizing? Well, yeah, but I mean, what you mean is that I have to go out and do that, and if you guys want to run it, that's fine, and have me show up at a place. I can do my best. I'm pretty good on my feet in that kind of environment, but right now I just see it as I have an overwhelming amount of work to do.
Yeah. So do you view propertarianism as a movement in and of itself, or just kind of a guide for other people that want to use it?
I originally planned. Yeah, I planned it out. I mean, I worked on it for 10 years. I planned out and I hit the timing. It was fine. Originally, I'd said, let's have, my goal is to produce a solution that leadership will emerge. I have lost confidence that leadership will emerge. And that's because we aren't seeing leadership emerge over this past year, we're not going to see it.
Okay. Black-pilled Curt Doolittle.
It's just, that's what I'm good at, right? I'm good at predicting future trends. But I don't think I'm wrong about this one. I think it's going to be a bloody house-to-house, slowly escalating civil war, and I can't tell where it goes. I think that if I get the courage to release my piece on the course and conduct of a civil war, I'll probably get put in jail for it. But if you look at how to conduct a war, I see it as a relatively easy win if you take the moral high ground, which is what I was planning. But if we're reduced to house civil war, you're talking about a whole lot of lowlifes with nothing to lose, basically raiding. And I'm thinking, well, we're going to lose that battle. Whereas if you say, I'm put a bunch of guys together and we'll handle it strategically, and give the government no choice but to negotiate, then I think we can win. But I've lost confidence in our people.
Okay. So you did one thing that struck me in your speech. I did pay attention to your speech. It was hard to pay attention with all that was going on.
It was harder to say it when I was having to scream too. But yeah.
Well, I actually have footage.
The speech is awesome. I'm really proud of the speech. If you rated it, I got across what I wanted, but 3 people heard it, because it was overshadowed by the throng.
I think it's actually on my YouTube channel. I think we got most of it. Obviously the distraction is in there too. So, but you did make references to natural law, and coming from an Orthodox Christian background, that probably means something different to me than it does to you. And so I was wondering, what is the root of that for Curt Doolittle? What is?
Well, it's Greek, right? It's Aristotelian. Like everything, the church, tried to make whatever somebody else did that they could use, they brought it and say it was theirs. Although the scholastics did revise it. If you look into what happened when the church saw what was happening in natives in the Americas, what the Spaniards were doing in the Americas, this created a bit of a Christian uproar, which was pretty honorable. And so from that point onward, it gets pretty good. But natural law is basically saying reciprocity in human affairs is no different from equilibrium in the universe. So that questions are logically decidable in law, just like they are logically decidable in in the physical universe. The only difference between you and I and the physical world is that we can we can capacitance, we can store energy, and we don't have to react, and we can choose because we can store energy. And so, in simple terms, natural law means there's a formal logic available to the social sciences, just like there is to the physical sciences. This means law isn't arbitrary. In other words, if it's not reciprocal, it's not law, it's command. And so this is what you hear, you'll hear the terms law, natural law, you hear the terms positive law, you've heard the terms of positive law, you hear legislation, you'll hear the terms regulation and command. And so these are just a few, that's the simple version. And so when you say what these things mean is quite different, though. Americans are at present, or were until recently, the only sovereign people on earth, because our law is sovereign, not our courts, not our government, but the people. And the people are sovereign under the natural law, which means it's not open to dispute any more than is gravity. And this, if you look at every other country, they are not sovereign. They're in England, or Great Britain, the parliament is sovereign. They can override the law. In most countries, that's the case. A dictator, of course, is totally sovereign and can make commands. But what distinguishes law from command or contract is whether it's natural or not. If you want to study this, you can just listen to a couple of fairly common podcasts on it. You learn it.
Okay.
So natural law is just is a way of saying that there's reciprocity. That's it. Or traditionally, it's called tort or property law. In other words, the libertarians aren't wrong; they just got the scope wrong.
This is so Anglo. This is so Anglo.
Well, I mean, that you got to remember, this is really, I mean, what's the history of the past from 1200 onward? We get the reintroduction of Aristotle into Europe. People don't think about it this way, but it wasn't like the scholarly people that translated and published the classics. It was the middle class in northern Italy that published that, and the middle class brought this stuff out. Well, say what happened in England. England gets this, of course, and they're trying to get out of the church first. And the second thing they're trying to do is they have a legal system and they preserve it. This is because of the power structure is maintained as a balance in England. And so our traditional law, our law that it was evolved on the steppe, moved into Europe, worked its way to the Mediterranean, into Greece, into Rome, back up into Germany, across Europe, and into the Anglo world. It's not that my world is Anglo. It's just that I'm just speaking in the language that's 5,000 years old without Christian or Enlightenment coloring. The Enlightenment is just a counter reaction against Anglo-empiricism, which is a restoration of Aristotelianism. So, the French come along with Rousseau, and that's his counter-revolution against the English. It's not Enlightenment, it's an unenlightenment. Kant comes along and he tries to create secular theology. It's not an enlightenment, it's a counter-enlightenment. You don't need philosophy, you just have the law. The Jews come along and they reform it. The Russians do their things. We have this big mess of the Industrial Revolution. The Jews come out with the pseudoscientific revolution, which is Freud, Bose, Marx, Cantor, Mises, Rothbard, Adorno, Fromm, Derrida, Fried, the whole litany of them. The Jews basically recreate the war on European civilization that they created with Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They recreate it with Marxism, postmodernism, feminism, and science denial. So, I mean, we're just going through now we're dealing with the Muslims. So, I mean, we've spent, we think of it like this is only going on a while, but we've been fighting the war to restore Aristotle for 800 years. And so, what do you think the whole history of Europe's wars are? They're the restoration of the reharmonization of European thought, in other words, what we speak about, with our traditional laws and our metaphysics. There's a reason, I mean, there's a reason Walter Cronkite looked like that when he was talking in the news. It's because he was testifying before the court. There's a reason why the enemy doesn't testify, they gossip. Because that's how the big lies are made.
Yeah. Well, we did get another $5 from Western Revival. Thank you very much. Curt, you don't need to handle the grassroots activism. That is our job. You should stay good at what you're doing, which is intellectual work. But political activism from myself and other guys has to happen. If it doesn't, we deserve to lose. So,
I agree. I just got to keep giving you intellectual weaponry.
So, all right. I don't know who. I guess I should figure out who that is. He's my friend too, but I don't know. It's not ringing a bell.
No, you won't figure it out.
So, but I do have. We're almost done, but I'm getting my text blown up by a good friend, Michael Witkoff, telling me to ask you questions. So I will
ask. I don't know what time it is, but I got plenty of time.
I try to stay around an hour, but let's see. So what? Hang tight. He sent them. It's hard to keep up with sometimes.
Don't apologize. Just take your time and tell me.
So how are you able to travel from country to country openly and publicly, talking about how to uproot national infrastructures, and how does that not result in your arrest for international terrorism?
Because I'm fairly knowledgeable about the law and what I say. And I don't cross the line ever. Like I said, if there's time to cross the line, then we cross it all together. That's fine. But it's pretty hard to argue with a guy who's saying, let's not kill each other. Let's restore rule of law. Let's try to make everybody happy. And let's fix the economy so that we all prosper, so that we don't kill each other and lose 10 or 20 million people. So, I mean, that's it. What you can't do is you can't be angry. You can't threaten people. In other words, you can't talk shit, right? I don't just... So, and the other thing is that I'm not important enough of a threat. Does that make sense? Like, I know that what I say gets around to the right people. But it's not like, it's not like Joe Rogan, right? I mean, if he says something, millions of people are going to hear it, and they're going to understand. If I say something, it's going to work its way around because it's an idea. But I mean, one of the reasons I don't get in trouble is I say things fairly indirectly. Does that make sense? I'm careful with how I say things.
Yeah, well, now you're on the Michael Sisco show, so, millions are going to see it. So, I'm kidding. Obviously. What another last one from Michael Witkoff. What benefits does your system have over historical Christian governance?
You can't have these arguments intelligently. The church was an extraordinarily corrupt organization on scales we can't imagine today. And it only managed to dig itself out of corruption when it was under threat of replacement in response to the Reformation. So the monastic, every major movement is a movement to end church corruption. The chapter I've just finished is on this subject, which is the economics of the medieval world, and the fact that, look, if you and I are brothers, and I'm the older brother, we're gonna have primogeniture. I'm going to inherit the land. What you're going to do is you're going to go over to the monastery and join the monastery. Why? Because every generation I buy some land and give it to the monastery. And so what's happening is there's no difference between the church. There's no difference between the church or the monastery and the local nobility. It's the same families running the same thing for profit. And now this turns, so people sell appointments, they take bribes. You get to the point where the people preaching don't even know, they can't read, they don't know what the Bible says, and they're just making stuff up. So this kind of thing is going on all the time. So it's a little bit like we have, with the sort of Me Too movement. What do you think of the Post-Modernist movement today? It's respected and adhered to by the urban elites, but if out in the countryside the people do, they kind of ignore it. Well, the church was a lot like that. The difference is that the church actually administered pretty well. So if you want to have land, you want to rent land from the church, you can get some, and they'll administer it pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any denying that there was some corruption in the Western Church in particular, but there was quite a period of Symphonia time in the Byzantine Empire that I think is pretty distinct from that.
Well, I mean, if you want to get so here's the deal. So I've told this story 1,000 times. You're in Germany. You're going through this beautiful mountain pass. You see this castle. Why is that castle there? Castle's there because that pass they go through gets them to tax everything that goes by it. Is that castle built on productive contribution, or is it built on extraction? What is the most important pass in the world? It's Constantinople, right? Right? And so what happens if you have all that trade go between those two places? Well, I mean, you're going to make money at it. And so you have the most valuable piece of real estate in the world able to fund a civilization that lasts for quite a long time, but not because of anything it's doing. Nothing at all. I mean, it might as well, it was just another Middle Eastern civilization. So it just lasted a long time because it had so much trade. Just like England's empire was built on so much trade, just like America's empire is built on so much trade. I mean, the reason we're wealthy as Americans has almost more to do with our military and our use of currency as a reserve currency than it does with anything else. I mean, China, what is China doing? They copied the American economy and the Nazi politics.
Yeah, well, I guess it really just comes down to if the church is actually the hospital for the soul, then I guess it, or if it's not, and if it's not, then I guess it really isn't doing anything. But if it is,
no, I mean, you're never gonna. I know nobody wants to hear this, but there's not going to be a Christian religion other than Protestant fundamentalism within 2 generations. It's not going to happen. The organized churches are done. So that's what's the data, and I don't see anything changing it. Because what's happening is people are leaving this traditional churches, half of them are going secular, and half of them are going fundamental, you call it evangelical.
Really? I don't see that as the trend. I think groups like the traditional bents from the Catholic Church, like SSPX, and they're seeing quite an increase. And then Orthodox Christianity.
It's nice when you do that. I go with data. What does the data say? Nope. Go to Pew Research and look up the data. So no, it's not going to be there. So it's more a question of Christianity has extraordinarily valuable training, but it comes at the cost of the Abrahamic method. So not only so many people can do that, and the people who do it can do it will continue to. The people who can't going to need something else. And right now they're going to every worst possible something else there is. The Christianity cannot compete with Islam, and over the long term it won't.
Well, I don't have the data in front of me, but I don't know. It seems like Orthodoxy is growing pretty rapidly. But
Orthodoxy, how many people are in Orthodox Church? You know?
In the U.S., or it's the second largest body of Christians in the world.
It's tiny.
In the U.S., it's tiny. In the world,
no. In the world, it's tiny.
No, it's the second largest body of Christians in the entire world.
I'll pull it up right now. denominations.
We make up 1% of the U.S., but we're definitely the second largest in the world.
Well, the second largest after what? The Catholic Church, the Protestant denominations, or the Orthodox Church?
After the Roman Catholic Church, the second largest is the Orthodox Church, mostly because of Russia, but hail Putin.
I'm going to avoid this. I don't want to win this conversation.
Oh, that's okay. It's all right. But basically, I appreciate you coming on, Curt. I think we had a good discussion. It looks like let me just check and see if we have any other super chats. I don't think we do. But any final words before anything in conclusion?
No, I mean, I enjoyed this. I'm trying to intentionally lay on a little black pill here, but because I'm pretty sure the president just blew his re-election. So
did he really? What happened?
Yeah, that speech was really bad.
Oh, he gave it.
Yeah. He when you're down when you can win by 1% of undecideds, blowing it like that wasn't good. And Biden's a fucking disaster. And so, but he's a disaster that he knows how to play to the dumb people. He's really good at it.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we go, I usually ask this question to every guest, and I don't prepare anybody for it. Favorite book, one that you did not write?
Do I have a favorite book?
You have to pick one. You got to pick one. At least a suggestion for the audience.
Well, I mean, I want to randomly. I'm just going to go with something popular. The book that I was really happy with was Dune when I was a teenager. I really liked that book, so I'm going to go with that one. Because everything else I mentioned will be esoteric.
Hey, Dune's a good option. Frank Herbert, good stuff. So
that's genius. That book is. I mean, aside from some other things in it, the use of the substitution of the spice for oil and the analogies he was making there was quite good.
All right. So if anybody wants to learn about propertarianism, where do they go?
Propertarian Institute. Right now I'm moving again. I'm switching it from being at propertarianism to just being about natural law. And I'm switching the institute from being an institute about propertarianism to the Propertarian Institute of Natural Law. Anyway, so propertarianism.com. Anyway, thanks you. Enjoyed talking to you, and as always.
All right. Thank you, Curt.
Take care.